Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. This time we're going to be tackling the always popular topic of time management.
Always popular.
Yeah, but maybe you're thinking, not another one. But we're going to try to make this one a little different. We're using an episode of the English Unlocked podcast as our guide.
Which is really cool because they focus on how we even talk about time management.
Right, so it's not just about the tips themselves, but like being able to explain yourself in English.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's the harder part. Not the doing, but the explaining.
So they start off with the question, why bother with time management at all? And, they list a bunch of benefits, but I feel like we've heard it all before, haven't we?
We have. They mention increased productivity, less stress, achieving goals faster, all that good stuff. But I thought it was interesting how they frame it.
Okay, how so?
It's not just about getting more done. It's about feeling more in control of your life. Like you're calling the shots, not just reacting to everything.
I like that. It's about making sure you're spending your time on the things that truly matter to you. And speaking of things that matter, the podcast introduces a ton of vocabulary, all related to time management. Did any of those words particularly stand out to you?
Procrastination definitely caught my eye.
Oh yeah, why?
Not because I'm a master procrastinator or anything, but because the podcast suggests using it actively in conversation.
Yeah.
So instead of just saying, I'm behind, you could say, procrastination really got me on this one. How can we get back on track?
Huh.
It kind of instantly adds a layer of self-awareness.
Yeah, and it makes it sound less like complaining and more like you're trying to problem solve.
Exactly.
I like that, taking ownership. So, instead of just listing all the vocabulary, maybe we could focus more on how the podcast encourages you to use those words.
Right.
Like they suggest making sentences with them, right? Why is that so important?
Because language is a tool for thought. The more precisely you can articulate a concept, the better you understand it.
Okay, so it's not enough to just recognize the words you have to be able to use them actively.
Right. And in the context of this podcast, practicing those sentences will help you discuss time management more fluently in English.
It's like learning any skill. You can read about playing the piano all day, but until you sit down and actually hit those keys, it's just theory.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. Okay, so the podcast goes beyond single words, too. They provide phrases specifically for talking about your schedule, your challenges, even asking for advice.
They even group them by category, which I thought was super helpful.
Yeah, but there are a lot of them. So instead of listing every single phrase, maybe we could pick a few that would be particularly useful for, say, someone trying to improve their time management skills.
Okay, how about this one? I'm trying to prioritize my tasks more effectively.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's simple, but it gets the point across.
It's straightforward and actionable. And you know what I just thought of? The podcast also have all these practice exercises. And I was thinking, instead of going through all of them, maybe we could pick one that seems particularly interesting and try to work through it together.
Sure, I'm game.
Okay, let's see. Oh, how about the one where they ask you to visualize your ideal day?
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, that seems like a good starting point for figuring out how you actually want to structure your time.
Definitely.
So they ask you to think about things like when your energy levels are highest, when you get the most done, and what activities drain you the most. It's really about understanding your own rhythms.
Yeah, and tailoring your schedule to them. It reminds me of something I read about chronotypes.
Chronotypes.
Yeah, it's the idea that we have different biological clocks that influence, when we're most productive. Some people are naturally early birds, while others thrive as night owls.
Oh, that's so true. So it's not about forcing ourselves into a rigid schedule. It's more about working with our natural tendencies.
Exactly. And the podcast actually touches on this when they talk about one of the key tips for effective time management: planning ahead.
Okay. But isn't that what everyone says? Use a planner. Duh.
Right. But they go a little deeper than that. They emphasize the importance of using a calendar or planner to schedule tasks in advance. But it's not just about the tool itself. It's about the intention behind it.
Okay, I see.
Like they encourage you to think about your ideal day and then use the planner to create a schedule that aligns with your energy levels and priorities. So it's about being proactive, not just reactive.
So you're not just writing down appointments, you're actually designing your ideal day. That's pretty cool. What else do they recommend?
Well, they talk about prioritizing tasks, which again might seem obvious.
Yeah.
But they offer a really interesting perspective. They suggest thinking about the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle.
Okay. The what now?
The Pareto principle. It states that roughly 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does that apply to time management?
Well, by identifying that crucial 20%, the tasks that will have the biggest impact, you can prioritize them and make sure that you're focusing your energy on activities that truly move the needle.
So it's not just about making a to-do list and checking things off randomly. It's about strategically focusing on the tasks that will bring the most significant results.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And this reminds me that they also talk about setting deadlines, right?
They do, but they caution against making deadlines too tight. It's all about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Challenging enough to keep you motivated, but not so overwhelming that they become a source of stress. They recommend aiming for a slightly earlier deadline than you really need.
So it's like building in a buffer zone.
Exactly. That way, if something unexpected comes up, you're not immediately thrown off track.
Smart. So we've talked about planning, prioritizing, setting deadlines. What else is on their list of time management tips?
Well, one thing they emphasize is the importance of avoiding multitasking.
Oh, that's a tough one.
I know. They even delve into the neuroscience behind it,
Okay.
explaining how constantly switching between tasks actually decreases productivity and can lead to more errors.
Oh, I've definitely experienced that. You think you're being super efficient, but then you end up making all these silly mistakes or just feeling completely drained.
Yeah, it's because our brains aren't wired for multitasking. Every time we switch tasks, there's like a mental switching cost. And that constant juggling act takes a toll on our cognitive resources.
Yeah. So instead of trying to do everything at once, they recommend focusing on one task at a time and giving it your full attention. It's kind of like that old saying, slow and steady wins the race, right?
Right. And they also remind us that breaks are not the enemy. They suggest taking short, mindful breaks throughout the day to recharge and reset.
So important.
They even brought up some interesting research about how even brief breaks can prevent cognitive fatigue, which can lead to, poor decision-making.
See, I knew this deep dive would be different. It's not just about using a planner and making to-do lists. It's about understanding the psychology and science behind time management.
It makes it so much more engaging, right?
Absolutely.
And that's just the first part of the podcast. We still have so much more to uncover in part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive on time management. We covered a lot of ground in the first part, but there's still so much more to explore.
Yeah, I'm really curious about those common time management mistakes that they mention. Everyone loves a good cautionary tale, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the podcast doesn't shy away from pointing out some of the biggest pitfalls. One of the most common ones is overloading your schedule. It's tempting to try to cram as much as possible into each day, but it can backfire spectacularly.
It's like that game Tetris, where you keep stacking the blocks higher and higher, thinking you've got it all under control, and then bam, game over.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And the podcast emphasizes the importance of setting realistic expectations, learning to say no to things that don't align with our priorities. They even give a specific phrase for this. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to decline. My schedule is already quite full.
Wow, that's so much more polite than my usual, nope, can't do it.
Right.
But seriously, it's so important to protect your time and energy. Otherwise, you just end up feeling overwhelmed and burnt out.
Exactly. And speaking of burnout, the podcast highlights another common mistake: neglecting breaks. We often feel pressured to work nonstop, but they remind us that taking regular breaks is essential for maintaining focus, energy, and overall well-being.
It's funny, we talked about this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Our brains simply aren't designed to operate at full capacity for extended periods. We need those moments of rest and rejuvenation to function at our best.
Right, and they even share a really interesting tip for making the most of your breaks. They suggest engaging in activities that help you detach from work and recharge your mental batteries.
So instead of mindlessly scrolling through social media, maybe go for a walk in nature, listen to some music or meditate, anything that helps you disconnect and come back feeling refreshed.
Exactly. It's about quality over quantity when it comes to breaks.
This whole conversation reminds me of the suitcase analogy they used in the podcast. We only have so much space, right? We need to pack it strategically, leaving room for the essentials and making sure it's not so overloaded that it bursts at the seams.
It's such a powerful visual representation of the concept. We have a finite amount of time each day, and it's up to us to decide how we fill that suitcase. Do we prioritize tasks that align with our goals and values? Or do we let it get filled with distractions and obligations that drain our energy and leave us feeling unfulfilled?
It's a powerful question, isn't it? And it leads us to another crucial aspect of time management: prioritization. The podcast really drives home the importance of identifying what truly matters and focusing our energy on those things. Like, how do we figure out what deserves our time and attention?
Well, they suggest asking yourself a simple question. What moves me closer to my big goals, not just my daily to-do list?
Oh, I like that.
It's about aligning our actions with our long-term aspirations, not just reacting to the immediate demands of the day.
It's like choosing the scenic route over the highway. Sure, the highway might get you there faster, but the scenic route offers a richer, more fulfilling experience.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it highlights the fact that time management is not just about efficiency, it's about creating a life that we truly enjoy living.
Right. It's about making choices that reflect our values and bring us a sense of joy and purpose. And you know what? The podcast even addresses the fact that learning a new language can be a time management challenge in itself.
Oh, yeah.
They encourage listeners to not be afraid to ask for help or look things up if they're not sure how to say something, which is so important, right?
It is. It's a reminder that everyone starts somewhere, and it's okay to not have all the answers. Learning is a process, and it's about embracing the journey, bumps and all.
And they also recommend using analogies to describe things you're not sure how to say. Like, you can't think of the exact word, just try to explain it in a way that people will understand.
It's a great way to make complex concepts more relatable, especially when you're still learning the language.
Yeah, analogies are powerful tools for communication. They help us bridge the gap between, abstract ideas and concrete experiences.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about common mistakes, the importance of prioritizing, and even how to navigate language learning challenges. But there's one more crucial aspect of time management that we haven't really touched on yet: mindset.
Ah, yes. The podcast dedicates a whole segment to the concept of an abundance mindset. It's not just about the tools and techniques we use to manage our time, but about our underlying beliefs and attitudes towards time itself.
Right. It's about shifting our perspective from seeing time as this scarce resource that we're constantly battling against to viewing it as a valuable tool that we can leverage to create the life we want.
It's about recognizing that we all have the same 24 hours in a day, and it's up to us to decide how we use that time.
Yeah, it's like moving away from that scarcity mindset and embracing an abundance mindset, where you believe that there's enough time to achieve your goals and live a fulfilling life. Okay, but what does that actually look like in practice? How do we go from feeling like we're constantly running out of time to believing that there's enough time for everything we want to do? I mean, it sounds great in theory, but how do we actually make that shift?
Well, the podcast suggests a few strategies. One is to focus on our values and priorities. When we're clear about what's truly important to us, it becomes easier to make decisions about how we spend our time.
It's like decluttering your closet. You get rid of the clothes that no longer fit or serve you, and it makes space for the pieces that make you feel confident and comfortable.
Exactly. And when we apply that same principle to our time, we create space for the activities and experiences that truly align with our values and bring us joy.
So it's not just about fitting more in, it's about making sure we're fitting in the right things.
Right. Another strategy they mention is practicing gratitude. When we appreciate the time we have, we're less likely to waste it on things that don't bring us joy or fulfillment.
Like, gratitude is a magnifying glass for abundance. It helps us focus on the good things in our lives.
Exactly. And it's not just about feeling grateful for big things like a promotion or a vacation. It's about appreciating the small moments, too. A beautiful sunset, a delicious meal, a good conversation with a friend.
Those small moments add up, and when we cultivate a habit of appreciating them, it changes our entire perspective on time. Instead of always wishing for more, we start to savor what we have.
Right. They also talk about mindfulness as a way to cultivate an abundance mindset. When we're fully present in the moment, we're less likely to get caught up in worries about the future or regrets about the past.
Yeah, mindfulness is like a reset button for our minds. It helps us break free from that autopilot mode that often governs our lives. We're just going through the motions without really thinking about what we're doing or why we're doing it.
Right. And it allows us to pause, reflect, and make intentional choices about how we want to spend our precious time.
So instead of constantly rushing from one task to the next, we're taking a moment to savor the experience, to fully engage with what we're doing.
And when we do that, we start to see time as an ally, not an enemy.
This whole concept of an abundance mindset is really resonating with me. It's not about denying the reality of our busy lives, but about choosing to focus on the possibilities rather than the limitations.
Exactly. And the podcast reminds us that developing an abundance mindset is an ongoing process. It's not about achieving some perfect state of, time management nirvana. It's about continuously refining our relationship with time and making choices that align with our values and goals.
It's a journey of self-discovery and growth, and it's a journey that we can all embark on, regardless of our current time management skills or English proficiency. Speaking of which, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear from you. All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive on time management. It's been so interesting to explore this topic with you and to see how much it resonates with so many people.
Yeah, it really is something we all seem to be grappling with, isn't it? And I think what's been really cool is how this English Unlocked podcast has kind of woven language learning into the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not just about the time management tips themselves, but about giving you the vocabulary and the confidence to talk about these concepts, especially in English.
So it's almost like tackling two challenges at once, improving your time management skills and also improving your ability to express those ideas effectively.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about planning and prioritizing, avoiding multitasking, the importance of breaks, and even cultivating an abundance mindset. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm wondering if there's anything we've missed, any final gems of wisdom from the podcast that we should highlight.
Let me think. Well, one thing that really stood out to me was their emphasis on self-reflection. They really encourage listeners to take a step back and evaluate their current time management strategies. Are they actually working? What could be improved?
So not just blindly following tips, but actually figuring out what works for you personally.
Exactly. They suggest asking yourself questions like, what are my biggest time wasters? Or what activities drain my energy the most? It's all about becoming aware of your own patterns and habits so that you can make conscious changes.
It's like taking inventory of your time, seeing where it's actually going, and then deciding if that aligns with your values and your goals.
Right. And they remind us that this is an ongoing process. Our needs and priorities change over time, so it's important to regularly check in with ourselves and adjust our time management strategies accordingly.
So it's not about finding the perfect system and sticking to it rigidly.
Wow.
It's about being flexible and adaptable and constantly evolving, which, if you think about it, is a great metaphor for life in general.
It is?
We're always learning and growing and adapting to new situations. Speaking of learning and adapting, the podcast concludes with some really encouraging words for anyone who's feeling overwhelmed by the prospect of improving their time management skills. They remind us that it's okay to start small.
Yes. Starting small is key. They emphasize that even tiny changes can make a huge difference over time. It's about building momentum, not trying to do everything at once.
It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Exactly. And they encourage listeners to celebrate their progress along the way, no matter how small it might seem.
It's about acknowledging those wins, big or small, and using them as fuel to keep moving forward.
And I think it's worth mentioning that this podcast, while focusing on time management, also touches on the importance of self-care.
Oh, that's so important. We often think of time management as purely about productivity, but it's also about taking care of ourselves, both physically and mentally.
Exactly. They remind us that when we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, it's even more important to prioritize activities that nourish our minds, bodies, and spirits.
Things like getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, all those things contribute to our overall well-being and actually make us more productive in the long run.
It really is about finding that balance between achieving our goals and taking care of ourselves.
And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Time management isn't just about getting more done. It's about creating a life that feels fulfilling and meaningful. It's about making choices that align with our values, that prioritize our well-being, and that allow us to pursue our passions.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs, successes and setbacks. But with a little bit of effort and self-reflection and a willingness to experiment, we can all learn to manage our time more effectively and create a life that we truly love.
This deep dive has been a fantastic reminder of that. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder. We've talked a lot about managing our time, but what if we shifted our focus to managing our energy? When are we most alert and focused? When do we need to recharge? How can we structure our days to maximize our energy and minimize those energy slumps? It's a whole other layer of time management. We hope this deep dive has given you some new insights and practical strategies to experiment with. And remember, the most important thing is to find what works for you. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic to explore together. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making the most of your precious time.